that everyone is a Dabang Salman Khan like action hero. Most of the job of an IPS officer is administrative in nature.
Mr. Shubham Jain, the All India Law entrance with rank 2, graduated from NLU to take up the challenge of the IPS job. An average middle class person who earns about 30 to 40,000 per month, he has to hire a lawyer. How are the legal charges?
It is certainly tough. I agree. Some reports point out that a good significant portion of the disputed property ends up going to litigation charges only. That has to be worked on. That is not an easy case.
If we look at the Nirbhaya incident, people who have committed such heinous crime, one of them was a juvenile.
We need to ensure that the youth is guided in a direction. Will not be cured by punishment either. For that purpose, the Juvenile Justice Act came into question. We should not be treating people under the age of 18 who are not majors. And obviously, it's not that every law is perfect, and there are going to be cases which are really sensitive.
India faces a unique challenge and a lot of cases are pending.
The number of judges is not enough. The number of policemen investigating cases is not enough. If a judge has to deal with 100 cases a day, how many witnesses do you take statements from? About 1.5 months of just weapon related drills do we actually end up in the firing range for the first time. Only after that do you get to exercise your power, because this is a massive power and it has to come with responsibility. So they make you responsible first and then hand you.
Namaskar dosto, I'm Shashank and you're watching The Honest Hour. Welcome to The Honest Hour, Shubham.
Thank you, Shashank. Pleasure to be here.
Same here. So in the year 2016, when you cracked the All India Law entrance with rank 2, one media person asked you, going ahead in your future, where do you want to see yourself as? At that time, you said that you want to be an environmentalist, right? And today, you are into the IPS. So how come this difference in the environmentalist dream and the police reality?
I think it's more about the orientation instead of just a dream of which career path I wanted to choose. I've always felt that I wanted to do something for the nation and something for the society in general. And back then, the most pertinent issue that I was really passionate about was environment conservation, and I still remain very passionate about it, frankly speaking. But over the course of time, I realized that there are way too many aspects to this entire question. Even in college, my primary goal was to be an environmental lawyer for a very good amount of time. Gradually, I realized that environment is more about people.
Amazing. So you chose to be part of the policy making and law enforcement in order to protect environment. And you said that in college you were also looking into environmental advocacy. So were you also part of any environmental advocacy groups per se, or any kind of activist movements when it comes to protecting the environment?
Not particularly any activist movements. I attended a few NGO camps, organizations, meetings. I also hosted a few meetings of my own for water conservation in college, for greening of areas nearby, and some nature walks, etc. But that is when I realized that a more systemic effort has to be provided, and that's when I decided that not merely an NGO activist, but probably from the government side, I could make a better impact.
So like you come from a background with strong academic excellence. Let's say your father is from IIT Delhi, your mom is an alumni of BITS Pilani, right? And you yourself has cracked the All India Law entrance with rank 2. You had many career options. Especially you could pursue corporate law where you have like very good pay scales. So why did you choose this difficult path of getting into public service?
Initially, getting into law was also a very difficult decision for my family. I realized there's this exam called the NTSE, National Talent Search Exam.
You topped that as well, I guess, right?
I ended up clearing it. That was a sheer stroke of luck, but preparing for it, I realized I'm not well cut out for the science stream. I used to face a lot of difficulty in ninth grade, 10th grade, when you're studying vectors, which is meant for 11th graders, I was
Hmm.
really overwhelmed.
Hmm.
And similarly, maths was never my strongest subject. I was decent in it. My parents would not accept anything less, but I was not the strongest person in mathematics around. So I had to choose a career where all of this could be balanced by other fortes, and I generally had a habit of reading.
Hmm.
So that is what pushed me into law. When I got into law, I realized that reading is a habit that actually helps you a lot in these government exams. Before that, I do not have a government background. Nobody in my family is a government servant, and we are fairly a middle class family from Delhi. So, for me, always the thought that UPSC as an exam was not really at the center of my life, because I always thought ये तो someone else would be giving it who's very studious, who studies
True.
for 12 hours,
Padaku
13
types.
hours a day. Haan, I was not that kind of person. I did score marks, but a lot of it was luck. So ultimately, I think it was in my fourth year of college when I decided that I want to pursue government services. Only after I decided that I don't want to be an environmental lawyer, and simultaneously, I did corporate internships. I worked with Supreme Court lawyers, and after that, I took this decision that law is something that people rush to when they don't get what they want. They actually go to the government to get what they want, and only when they don't get it uh, do they approach a court. So that was a very clear realization that made me realize that probably government service would be a great way to actually make an impact in the lives of people. With that motivation, I started out, and it was genuinely God's grace that I got through. I will keep reiterating it many
True.
times, because this is something that people need to realize that ultimately He is the doer. We are
True.
just here to do what it's required.
So in this journey, did you ever feel like quitting UPSC preparation?
It's very sure if I didn't make it in my second attempt, I would have at least considered something else. Because by then I was already practicing as a lawyer, so I could see that there is an alternate career besides UPSC preparation. And I would recommend it to everyone generally that uh, always have a backup plan, because this is certainly only God's will that you end up clearing the list, because there are 9 exams that you have to physically write. Then there are 2 exams of prelims and then an interview. Overall, you will be giving about 32 hours of exams only in this process. And if anything goes wrong, you're practically out of the game, and it wastes an entire year directly. So it is always good to have a backup plan. Thankfully, I had a professional degree that I could fall back on, but I genuinely recommend it to everyone else also, that having a backup plan really makes your own self confidence also better. That you're not really fearful of what will happen if something does not work out. So definitely that was there.
Coming to the interview or the personality test,
Hmm.
we see a lot of videos on YouTube and also social media where a certain type of questions are asked. And also in a lot of blogs that we see that UPSC interview में ये question पूछा था. These are the kind of questions that they ask in UPSC. You need to know everything under the sun. So what is your take on the personality test for a common person who's aspiring to prepare for UPSC? What would you like to shed some light over that?
So most of it is genuinely uh, make believe for the purpose of grabbing some spotlight. Like I once saw WhatsApp forward that UPSC asked, what state does Ganga River flow from? And the answer was state of water. And such kind of questions do pop up in WhatsApp forwards. You're not really asked all of this in a real UPSC interview. That process is more of a interaction like we're having right now probably, but with a very experienced board. The chairperson of the board is a member of the Constitutional Commission, and then there are 4 invitees of the chairperson. who we do not have any details of. Like, there is no way to judge who the person is who's asking questions to you, and neither do they declare for safety purposes, for ensuring the integrity of the interview process. It is better that they don't reveal the names. And they genuinely try to interact with you, they try to know who you are. It's not that there are no questions on general knowledge, but a lot of them are from your own background. I have gone through 3 interview processes and I've always been asked questions on law. They ask you questions on your hobbies. They ask questions on contemporary importance or probably about the state that you come from. And generally, psychological questions might be asked. They might ask about books that you are reading or about something that they are reading. And fairly, it's an attempt to make us comfortable as well. They don't try to pressurize a candidate too much. Their aim is not to see that will they survive an interrogation by a terrorist organization. Their aim is to know if the candidate is a fit person for the civil services, and it's very cordial.
So could you take us to how the police training is? There are a lot of movies that we see. They talk about the training of an IPS. IPS बनना है तो physically fit रहना है. So there are a lot of apprehensions regarding that. So could you take us on what exactly is the expectation of the academy from the recruitees, and how does the training start, and how does it progress?
Indeed, the expectation is that a police officer who is going to be at a commanding rank has to be physically fit as well as technically aware and should have the necessary skill set that is required from a police officer. So it is very scientifically designed to gradually improve the physical fitness of the candidates who have cleared the exam. It is well understood in the academy that everyone who clears the exam has been in a preparation mode for the past 3, 4, 5 years. And unlike, let's say, army or uh, paramilitary forces, where the candidates entering the forces are very young, the average age of someone who clears the UPSC exam is about 25, 27, or even more. And so, therefore, the training is designed in a manner that you can you do not get injured in the process of getting physically fit. But yes, there is a certain rigor to the training with regard to physical fitness as well as outdoor skills. You have to be uh, you have to wake up very early, you have to wake up before 5 a.m., you have to report in a proper dressage, and then there are certain activities that ultimately you will be marked upon. There is musketry, firing. There is equitation, which is horse riding, alongside tactics, physical strength, stamina, endurance, etc., along with other activities like yoga, swimming, and sports. So, all of these are indeed physically demanding, but a very significant part of the training is also the indoors component, which is your study of law, forensics, ethics, etc., which are very important, especially as police commanders for any IPS officer.
So, in this rigorous training procedure, was there any moment that you felt, "अरे यार किधर आ गया मैं?" Like, what is this, tremendous pressure that
I
I've
think
got into?
everyone goes through that because it is genuinely a very tough training. Throughout, you're challenging yourself. Sometimes your body is not ready to run in the morning. Sometimes you might have had a bad night of sleep, and right after that you have to wake up and realize कि आज 10 kilometers फिर से दौड़ना पड़ेगा. So many times you don't feel like it, but gradually it builds up in you that turning up and showing up is also half the job done.
Through that?
And that gradually builds up discipline because I think a lot of people going through the UPSC preparation process would also realize that you will not be motivated every day. You're not going to be in the mood for doing something at all times. It is discipline that gets you forward. And academy ensures that discipline is a non-compromised aspect of training. So we have no choice, and that gradually ends up becoming ingrained in character.
So, I was just reading somewhere that you are, pursuant of calisthenics. Can you tell me what is calisthenics and how did it help you in this IPS training?
So I was introduced to calisthenics in college. It's basically a set of body weight exercises, either using no particular instruments or generally available bars or uh, other such poles. So you will find, let's say, a monkey bar in a park
Hmm.
or even a tree for a branch of a tree that you can hang from. And you basically use your own body's weight to exercise, such as pull ups, push ups, dips, and then gradually it gets more and more advanced, and there is no limit to it. But it's firstly, it's very economically available. As a college student, also, you do not need a gym membership to
Hmm.
participate in calisthenics. You can just go to a regular park, even where children are playing, and you can participate.
So it builds endurance and strength together, is it?
It is mostly about strength, but
Acha.
there is an endurance component to it.
Hmm.
Definitely. That helped when I came to training because a lot of the training component involved strength exercises. So at least, I had a partial introduction to it, but what I learned in training was far more than what I had ever imagined.
So as part of your training, you also have this, weaponry, right?
Hmm.
So from books to holding weapons, the first time you held a weapon, how did it feel like?
The first time you hold a weapon, it's very unreal, but I think as a part of a uniformed service, it's very important that for the protection of others and for your own protection, you should know all of these aspects. It is never to brag or to threaten someone until unless they're a real enemy of the state, but it is a very important skill for emergency purposes. And gradually, the academy builds that discipline of how to handle it effectively, how to ensure there are no accidents. Only after about 1.5 months of just weapon related drills do we actually end up in the firing range for the first time.
Acha.
So that is very scientifically designed to ensure that everyone knows the discipline first, and only after that do you get to exercise your power, because this is a massive power and it has to come with responsibility. So they make you responsible first and then hand you the option.
And you also have forensic and also something like CRPC, IPC, and presently the BNS, etc., that you have to go through. So there's something called as criminal psychology, right? So what's your take on that? You see a lot of crimes in society. Could you explain for a common man how criminal psychology plays a crucial role in investigation?
Indeed, so multiple theories exist as to why people commit crimes. There is no one accepted answer for what ultimately pushes a person into crime. But reading those different aspects, such as it could be a money driven crime, it could be a passion driven crime, ultimately ends up familiarizing officers with different kinds of motives which can exist. And obviously, in any investigation, I will not be talking about investigative processes, but it really helps an investigating officer that if you have to make an estimate of what a criminal can be, you have to know what he wants. So, in that sense, it's very useful.
So talking about criminal psychology, I see that you have been posted in UP Cadre, right? And in many movies or certain anecdotes that you can think of, if you could explain to the audience how criminal psychology actually manifests and how does the investigative officer utilize it?
I mean, if there's a great movie on Netflix, Kurup, it's about this one serial killer who ends up escaping, and then ultimately, it's a very good story that you will find of how a very smart criminal can end up fooling a lot of organizations for a very long period of time. And similarly, if you look at another example from Kerala only, the Uttara murder case, you might have heard of it, where a woman was bitten by a snake, and the police ended up proving that it was a murder. That her own husband had purchased a snake, a cobra snake, placed it inside the lady's room, and ultimately pushed her into an act that would get her bitten by the snake. So these are not easy things to investigate ultimately, to even suspect that there is foul play, because who will ever suspect a foul play in such a case? But one of the primary principles that we have in forensics is the principle of exchange, that every transaction leaves a trace. So there is no crime that can ever happen which has absolutely zero traces of it. It is only an investigator's ability that can you spot the trace or not. And so, for example, in the Uttara case, they ended up finding the dead body of the snake. They ended up comparing the fangs of that dead body to the fangs on the body of the victim.
Achha.
And then they ended up searching for the person who had sold the snake to the husband. And they ended up establishing that yes, it was actually a premeditated plan. And a lot of evidence went into it, etc. But you will find such really brilliant cases of investigation only because someone had a hunch that this could also happen, and you have to be really creative when you think about it, because whoever is committing a crime with this kind of a smart fashion clearly does not want to be caught. And you
Certainly.
will find many cases, unfortunately, where crimes are very open. Right? Someone ends up killing someone else or robbing someone else in almost broad daylight. There, it's not very difficult a task to establish that why they could have done something, because normally, if it's a neighbor killing a neighbor for a piece of land, you know what the motive is.
True.
But it is normally more twisted mentalities that sometimes occur, which make for a very interesting case once it is solved, and a very frustrating case for the
Many a
investigator
times.
while it is being solved.
So, taking a cue from that, like, how do you balance this aspect of doing a thorough investigation and also being sensitive to the target, or target group that you're investigating? Sometimes you have community backlashes when the police is interrogating somebody or the police is going to the ground level. So how do you try to strike a balance in such kind of scenarios? And you have several cases which include mob per se. These days mob lynching is also a major concern, like that. So when it is a group related criminal activity, how do we deal with it?
There are SOPs in place in every state on how to deal with different kinds of situations. I will not be getting into the details of that, but a lot of it is context dependent. You cannot make a blanket yes or no statement, or neither can you prescribe to a person that this is what you should do. There are certain legal guidelines that the Supreme Court has mandated, that a warning has to be displayed, especially if a mob gets unruly, and there has to be a proportionate increase in force, and all of that are followed by police organizations. But who do you talk to? Uh, what is the level of the threat that you perceive in a mob? All of these are context dependent issues, and I don't think a straitjacket solution can be more devastating for an officer if they have to follow and if it doesn't actually apply. So it depends really on the context, and the officers in charge have enough freedom to ensure that they take an action to prevent law and order.
So to put it in context, if we look at the Nirbhaya incident, amongst the people who have committed such heinous crime, one of them was a juvenile. And in that context, it was very difficult to have a fair process. And this juvenile was coming under the ambit of Juvenile Justice Act, which was actually acting as a shield for him. Right? In this scenario, what is the dilemma, and how do you think we can deal with it? Later, of course, they have tweaked the juvenile justice to see to it that people between the age of 16 to 18, if they commit heinous crime, they can be tried as adults. But that guy who has actually committed such heinous crime got away with.
So these are not views of the government, these are my personal views,
In a
and
generic,
I will let the lawyer inside me take over. That we must understand this very cardinal constitutional principle, that you cannot punish someone for an act which was not a crime when it was committed.
True. No retrospective application.
Exactly. So, the fact that it was a 17-year-old, and you imagine, how old are you? Let me ask.
I'm 34.
You're 34. Can you imagine how smart you were at 17? Because when I look back at my own 17-year-old self, I'm genuinely embarrassed.
True.
And this is not to ridicule a situation. The problem is that we need to ensure that the youth is guided in a direction, that it is not just a straitjacket solution that we end up punishing everyone because someone who is not capable of understanding that what they are doing is wrong or contrary to law will not be cured by punishment either.
Hmm.
And for that purpose, the Juvenile Justice Act came into question, that we should not be treating people under the age of 18 who are not majors at par with people who at least have sufficient maturity. And obviously, it's not that every law is perfect, and there are going to be cases which are really sensitive
True.
and they have to be dealt with sensitively. But in the process, we should realize and keep in mind why a law was enacted in the first place. So, I personally feel that the law took its course in a decided case. We are nobody to comment on the justice aspect of it. It was dealt with at all levels of the judiciary, and that also does not indicate in any manner that the law is insufficient. Where the government felt, and that has been the beauty of a democratic government, that wherever there is a clear gap in the law, it is always amended to ensure that in the future such an instance does not happen. But you also have to ensure that you cannot retrospectively make things a crime just because uh, you feel that in that case justice could not be done.
No, in general, we see a lot of times in media, there's a lot of public perception against certain laws or how they operate. So, in that context, I was just trying to understand what's your opinion, whether, the contextuality of the case should be taken into consideration, or we follow the democratic and constitutional principles in dealing with such cases.
Indeed, so there are two ways to go about it. The police has very little discretion in this matter, because if you expect the police to decide what is right or wrong, uh, then you're not really expecting them to do their own job, which is to investigate neutrally and fairly.
Hmm.
The job of a police officer is to investigate a case as fairly as he or she can and submit all required evidences to the court. And then it is upon the court to apply the law. Now, the law itself comes with certain limitations and certain exceptions that, under certain cases, depending upon the situation of the accused or the status of the victim, etc., the court can either mitigate the penalty, aggravate the penalty, etc. These are uh, options available with the court. And simultaneously, the next process is that if a law is indeed unjust or if it is repeatedly leading to different outcomes, then that becomes a governmental issue.
True.
I think the democratic government is one of the best ways to deal with it, because only in a democracy you find that agitations, people's opinions are actually heard, and they are heard by people who are accountable directly to the people. So, this cycle of accountability is very important, and it ensures that there is no further injustice in the process of curing one injustice. Obviously, we never make it to a perfect solution, and I don't think there will ever be a perfect solution for anything, but we can always be better. And I genuinely think that this mix of a properly democratic government and a very independent and impartial judiciary is a very good way to achieve that.
Fair enough. And if we look in recent times, with the advent of social media, we see a lot of youth falling prey to online scams, online frauds, cyber crimes, etc. So, what should be the approach of parents as well as the youngsters themselves in dealing with responsible use of social media?
This is indeed a very pertinent issue. In fact, the Honorable Prime Minister also made a mention of this event in Man Ki Baat, that digital scams are on the rise, and there are also many new innovative methods with which criminals are coming up uh, to dupe different age segments, be it elderly people, be it very educated middle class people, be it youngsters. The first step is that after uh, you become a victim, you should report it immediately. The modus operandi of criminals continues to evolve, but we should always trust the law enforcement agencies that they will take note. Not every case can be solved with the same degree of efficiency, but it still gets noted, and that adds to the database that police agencies have about what kind of crimes are on the rise and how to investigate them. The government also constantly takes note of these. So, very important is to report, and secondly, is to be cautious. Do not trust anything uh, blindly. Do not click on links. And I think a lot of sensitization campaigns are on, but very different state policies. Uh, there are community policing initiatives, there are digital education initiatives, and in many states it has been quite effective. That it has reduced the level of vulnerability, especially of youth, of elderly, of different very vulnerable sections of population to and these kinds of crime. But sensitization as well as education about what to avoid and what to pursue is important. And the third part is ultimately that just because there is a risk does not mean you do not undertake any activity altogether. It's not that you quit all social media, it's not that you never use the internet and live like a hermit. It is only that you use it responsibly, safely, and do not just blindly end up searching anything. You act in a very cautious manner, because yes, there is a risk, but there are also far more benefits to the internet and to the online world than there are risks.
Coming to the privacy of citizens versus law enforcement, do you think the law enforcement agencies should be able to get access to the database or the personal database of individuals? Sometimes, in recent times, we have seen because of lack of proper information, the investigative authorities could not actually track the crime. So, how do you balance this democratic principle of privacy at the same time the efficiency in investigation?
Courts have laid out a very effective path for it.
Hmm.
Privacy is a fundamental right. We neither the law enforcement agencies nor anyone else gets to infringe on it. But obviously, like any other fundamental right, there are reasonable restrictions on it. And for investigation of offences, recently, not really recently, a few years ago, but in Virendra Khanna, the
Hmm.
Supreme Court has made it clear that when you can actually intrude into the private domain of an individual who is accused of an offense for investigation purposes, and when you cannot. And simultaneously, something that is beneficial for the privacy as well as for investigation is if someone is genuinely accused and if other evidence points towards them and they refuse that I don't want to show any of my private chats, then it's a legally speaking. This is the lawyer inside me talking again,
Sure.
but uh, legally speaking, the court can draw an adverse inference. The court can say that, okay, then I will assume that you have something to hide because everything else points towards you. So that's a clear cut safeguard, I think, that there is no unnecessary intervention. People have the right to safeguard what they want, and until unless they are actually gravely implicated in a crime, they are safe from any kind of police intrusion.
Today's youth is facing new challenges, and that has also become a Herculean task for the police and the government system to deal with. Let's say the proliferation of drug menace in Punjab and many parts of the country, and this so called hippie culture, or also getting into online gaming and different kinds of applications. What would be your approach as a, not strictly from a policeman perspective, as a responsible citizen? How do we deal with such kind of social issues that have a far reaching impact on the society per se?
That's too broad a question for anyone to answer individually. It's a drugs are a very major social menace. I think the solution will also have to be social. That the entire society has to get together to solve this menace. people have to be educated about the actual harmful effects of different types of drugs. Drugs are not a uh, homogeneous term. Narcotics are also different, psychotropics are
True that.
different, and people do not understand the severity of the law that deals with it. The NDPS Act is a very severe act. It leaves no residues. It catches everything that comes under the radar of the law enforcement agencies. And besides police action, there is a massive need to educate and to redirect the energies of the youth.
Sure.
That if different social problems such as social isolation, that in the digital age many people have stopped talking to real friends and they
True.
spend a lot of time online, that and many other such things such as proliferation of different applications, online gaming you mentioned, all of these can ultimately end up boosting one or the other drug menace. It's very important that I personally feel that youth has a lot of energy. It is your most energetic phase in life. That is the one phase where you genuinely feel that you have the power to change the world. And why will a person ever consume drugs? My guess is that it is because they end up feeling hopeless about it.
Hmm.
And them consuming drugs then is just a symptom. The lack of hope in those people is what needs to be addressed. And I think that has to be a social effort, a governmental effort. But I think this direction that you end up engaging the youth, ask them what they need, and try to provide it in that manner might be a very good direction to go in. I do not have a solution to this problem, unfortunately, but definitely law enforcement agencies should not stop the other aspect of it. This is the
Hmm.
soft aspect, but the hard aspect that we end up cracking down on drug networks, on these organized crime syndicates is very, very important, and this should continue. This is happening at a breakneck speed right now,
True.
but still a very long way to go.
Recently, the Chief Justice of India, B.R. Gavai, said that India faces a unique challenge where there are a lot of under trials and a lot of cases are pending. What is your take on this? Is there some systemic lacunae, or is it because of inaccessible justice in the country?
I don't think justice is inaccessible, but definitely the state is overwhelmed by the demand for justice, if you think about it in this way. Currently, there are, uh, if you compare the number of judges that we have per lakh population to other countries, the number of judges is not enough. The number of policemen investigating cases is not enough. And all of this ends up piling up.
Hmm.
That if a judge has to deal with 100 cases a day, how many witnesses do you take statements from? How many? And they also have to be constantly shifting their mind that this person was a witness in this case, etc.
Huh.
And so this problem ends up compiling because there's a lack of infrastructure. But I think that's only a temporary transitory phase
Hmm.
because we are in an era where more people are now aware of their rights. So, more people are willing to approach courts to actually exercise their rights. But simultaneously, we are in an era where uh, judicial capacity has not increased at the same pace. If you look at, for example, Delhi announced, I think, about 500 plus crores for hiring legal researchers for judges so that they don't
Hmm.
have to go through every case. They can get a summary
Okay.
from youngsters who are law graduates or law students, and afterwards they can be apprised of the case. This will also help these young lawyers uh, to boost up their own CV. Simultaneously, it helps the judge in making a more informed decision in a
Hmm.
more efficient manner. So, these are some initiatives, and I think multiple such initiatives are underway in multiple states. Uttar Pradesh has Mission Shakti going on, where
Mm-hmm.
the police ends up coordinating uh, the witnesses in different cases to their hearings, so that it's not a day is not delayed only because someone did not reach court on time. So such uh, gaps are being identified as we speak. That not all real gaps have been identified as of now, and as we keep on identifying, it's also being addressed.
All this looks good in theory, right? But practically, let's say an average middle class person who earns about 30 to 40,000 per month. Let's say he's trapped in some legal trouble, and then he has to hire a lawyer. And off late, how are the legal charges?
Indeed.
Right? So how does an average person having a decent income deal with these legal challenges? Especially the middle class suffers the most when it comes to justice delivery.
It is certainly tough. I agree. Some reports point out that a good significant portion of the disputed property ends up going to litigation charges only.
True that.
So that has to be worked on. That is not an easy case. But if you look at it, it's not as if nothing has been done for it. Let's say the kinds of cases that a middle class person gets into is probably a rent dispute or a check bouncing case. But for other cases such as unpaid wages, now there are separate tribunals. For, let's say, a small businessman, there's a separate tax procedure, there's a separate insolvency procedure, which is not as lengthy. Now, recently in the Bharatiya Nagrik Suraksha Sanhita, there's a time based trial concept that has been introduced. Beyond just setting up of a fast track court, there's also that every court has to finish trials within defined timelines. So, gradually, law is catching up, and overall, ultimately, lawyers will also catch up, judges will also catch up with this process. So, we are in the direction of change. Obviously, limited capacity, limited infrastructure, limited voice of the people. Not everyone has economic capacity, not everyone is aware of who to approach or what to ultimately do. All of this plays a hindering role, but it's ultimately the direction that we can think of, and I think the direction is significantly positive. That if you look at what we were 10 years ago, or then what we were 20 years ago, or if you ask your parents what 40 years ago you
Sure.
had, and if you look at now, we have significantly progressed. And I think it is only the future which can tell us that how much we will end up progressing. And I have not lost my hope. And this is one request that I have from every youth of the country, that do not lose hope, whatever and wherever you come, wherever you are, that be hopeful that yes, change is happening, and be a part of that change in whatever manner you can be.
So moving on from the legal aspect, thousands of aspirants get inspired by you and your journey, whether you accept it or not. So what is that one slogan or one motto that you'd like to give them?
I mean, to anyone who thinks that UPSC is an end in itself, like, do you stop living after you clear the exam? No. And life is a journey. We will always keep moving forward, and there will be worries, there will be good stuff, bad stuff at every juncture in life. It's not easy, and it is only because a very rosy picture sometimes gets painted that you end up thinking about this career as a bed of roses, which it's not. And in fact, there is no career where you will find a bed of roses. In fact, uh, if you ever aim for a career with no problems, your biggest problem will be the lack of problem. It is really frustrating.
Rightly said.
So, the one message that I have for aspirants, that remember that a lot of luck plays into this process. And the harder you work, the luckier you get. Do not discount the fact that God has to be in your favor on that day and throughout the process for you to actually land up there. And if you accept that God is there in your process, or whatever you believe in, it's not mandatory to believe in one or the other, but be grateful. Be grateful and try to do justice to what you have achieved. Like, don't think of it as an end in itself. That's all.
But many aspirants, in spite of you quoting, many toppers quoting, they say that we want to bring about social change. We want to create an impact in the system. So, what are the alternatives for such kind of youth to channelize their energies?
I mean, the biggest alternative is a, I think, a misnomer that you think that UPSC is the only path, and then there are many ways, and one of the ways is by entering government service, but one of the biggest ways is by entering the private sector, which is the largest sector, to create employment, to create socially valuable employment for people, to end up participating in public discourse, to not be a mute spectator to anything wrong that you see. And there is going to be friction wherever, whatever you do, it's not free from friction, because we are a developing, changing country. But if you look at a developed country, also there is friction there as well. So, to not be afraid of friction in life, in fact, uh, it is only the friction that polishes any stone that you end up finding to be polished enough. So, to not be afraid and to enter any stream that you wish to be with full dedication and with full preparation. Do not go underprepared in any stream, go with passion and go with self confidence that whatever you've done is ultimately a product of your own ancestors, your own hard work, and blessings of so many people that you're unable to count. And just be grateful and keep moving forward in with a view that you want to do justice in the future. This is not a single path. There is a private sector and there are social
Hmm.
sector jobs. You can always volunteer, even if and there is no job available in a domain, but you can volunteer with educational organizations. There are health NGOs working, which will always end up requiring. You can donate blood, you can help create awareness about issues in your own particular domain. There are so many ways in which you can create a positive impact. And I think just to think that UPSC is the only way is one of the biggest impediments that prevent a person from creating the impact that they can. So it is to wish everyone that they participate in any way that they can.
Rightly said. So, let's move into the quick rapid fire question. Okay. One legal principle every citizen should be aware about. One legal or constitutional principle.
It's the rule of law that no matter who you are, no matter how big you are, the law is above you.
Amazing. The biggest myth about IPS officers that needs to die.
That everyone is a Dabang Salman Khan like action hero. Most of the job of an IPS officer is administrative in nature.
Hmm.
There is obviously a very huge field aspect involved, but it's more administrative in nature. It's
Hmm.
more of HR applications from subordinates. It's reviewing a lot of files. So do not think that your era of studying is over just because you end up clearing an exam.
One thing about Supreme Court practice as an advocate that you miss.
There was a lot of diversity. One day you might get an intellectual property dispute, and the next day you're preparing an anticipatory bail application, which was very, very diverse from each other, like absolutely different domains. And I think it kept the brain very active, that you don't know what to expect next. That was very interesting. I kind of miss it because now life is very regimented and in a particular direction which I have myself chosen. But obviously, nostalgia sometimes hits.
Your biggest shock about ground reality once you got into the service. What, based on what you have read in textbooks compared to what you have read in textbooks.
The shock actually came when I was practicing, was that law is more in the format and the uh, how you write it instead of what it actually says. My clerk at Supreme Court and then with the lawyer who I was practicing under, he was one of my best teachers in that regard. And he was the only one who actually ran the office because he
Hmm.
was the one who knew how to file a case.
True. So they say there's a lot of difference between theory of law and law in practice.
Indeed.
Yeah. And one change that you'd like to make to the UPSC process, given an opportunity.
I think it would be better if different services are recruited through different exams that cater to service related competencies. It's just an opinion which other commissions have also thought of. It's something that the government might be considering already.
3 books that you recommend for every youngster to read.
One is Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. It's a great spiritual book. Another that I would recommend is India After Gandhi by Ramchandra Guha. A beautiful book on the history of post independent India. Another might be there's this book called The Open Focus Brain by a Princeton psychologist Les Fahmy, which is about how you can meditate and you can be peaceful at any particular time. I think these have been very helpful to me throughout preparation and generally before and after that as well. Yeah.
Could you let us know who's the most influential person that you look upon to? Could it
Am I
be a
allowed
person in
to?
history or anybody? Yeah.
My own family, my grandfather was a journalist in the All India Radio, and I think his example is one that I've always looked up to. That you shouldn't be afraid of new challenges. And as a journalist, he always had to encounter a lot of these things, and learning from him, looking up to him, has been a great process of self manufacturing for me.
Shubham, you've shared some incredible insights on law, policing, and the UPSC preparation. And in the end, if there is one message that you'd like to give to the youth of today, what would that be?
I think I already said it in the middle of it, but believe in yourself, believe in the nation and its future, and keep working for yourself as well as for the betterment of others. I think don't neglect yourself, but also remember that you're not alone around, and that would be it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shashank.